The council chamber on Theris 7 was filled with fear. Elder scientist Moravelle stood before the holographic display, her 6 delicate fingers trembling as she manipulated the ancient data. Around her, the last leaders of the Velkari Union waited in silence. They had no more words left. No more hope. 3 years ago, the Krithak Dominion had arrived in their space. 3 years ago, 40 peaceful worlds had become hunting grounds. The Velkari were herbivores, gentle creatures who had never known war. Their greatest achievement had been art and music that could make stones weep. Their greatest weakness was that they had never learned to kill. The Krithak had no such weakness. Commander Thelris watched the reports scroll past on his screen. Billions dead, entire colonies harvested for genetic experiments, children taken to slavery camps. The Krithak were efficient predators, and they had found the perfect prey. His people had tried to fight back, but their weapons were toys compared to Dominion warships. Their fleets were gone. Their armies were scattered. All that remained was this moon, this chamber, and the terrible choice before them. The ancient protocol, Moravelle said quietly. Her voice barely carried across the room. It is our last option. We know nothing about it, another council member protested. The beacon is millions of years old. We don't know who left it. We don't know what will answer. Moravelle looked at the elder with sad eyes. We know the Krithak are coming. We know they will be here in 2 weeks. We know what they will do to us. She paused, letting the weight of truth settle. Can anything be worse than that? No one answered. They had all seen the footage from the harvesting centers. They had all heard the screams. The beacon sat in the center of the chamber, a crystalline structure that hummed with impossible energy. Ancient text covered its surface, written in a language that predated their civilization. Moravelle had spent months decoding it. The message was simple. When prey needs protection, activate this device. Protectors will come. But there was a warning too, barely readable, corroded by time. Beware what you summon. Some protectors are worse than predators. Thelris stood up, his legs shaking. What choice do we have? Activate it. The vote was unanimous. Moravelle approached the beacon with slow steps. She placed her hand on the activation plate. The crystal began to glow, brighter and brighter until everyone had to look away. Then it pulsed once, sending a signal out into the void of space. The beacon transmitted everything. Every piece of data the Velkari had collected on the Krithak. Every massacre, every experiment, every slave world. The transmission included biological data, star charts, tactical assessments, and one final message. We are dying. Please help us. We have nowhere else to turn. The signal traveled faster than light, cutting through space like a knife. It searched for something, anything that matched the ancient parameters. The beacon had been programmed by a species long dead, left behind as a gift or perhaps a weapon. Its translation matrix labeled everything it scanned. The Velkari, prey species. The Krithak predators. Threat level, extinction imminent. The galaxy was full of civilizations. Most of them ignored the signal. Some couldn't receive it. Others didn't care. But the beacon was patient. It searched and searched until finally, 3 weeks later, it found something. A world on the outer edge of explored space. A planet marked in galactic databases as uninhabitable. The gravity was too high. The predator saturation was catastrophic. The weather systems were violent beyond measure. According to all standard models, intelligent life could not evolve there. The databases were wrong. The signal reached Earth. In the Solar Defense Command Center, alarms began screaming. Analysts scrambled to decode the transmission. What they found made several of them physically sick. The footage of Krithak harvesting centers was played once, then immediately classified. Within an hour, the data had reached the highest levels of Terran government. Within 6 hours, Admiral Catherine Morrison was pulled from her vacation and shown the files. She watched in complete silence. Her face showed no emotion, but those who knew her saw the way her hands gripped the armrests of her chair. They saw the small muscle twitching in her jaw. How far? She asked. 3 months at maximum slipspace velocity, ma'am. Prep the Wrath of Saul Expeditionary Fleet. Full combat load. Authorization code Morrison Alpha 7. Ma'am, first contact protocol requires... I know what it requires, Lieutenant. Morrison's voice was ice. And I'm telling you to prep my fleet, now. The lieutenant ran. Back on Theris 7, Moravel sat alone in her laboratory. The beacon had gone silent after transmitting. She didn't know if anyone had received the message. She didn't know if anyone was coming. All she could do was wait and hope that whatever answered would be better than what they already faced. 3 weeks after activation, the beacon suddenly lit up again. Every screen in the council chamber flared to life. A single word appeared, written in a language the translation matrix struggled to process. When it finally rendered the meaning, Moravel felt something she hadn't felt in years, not hope. Not exactly, but something close to it. The word was, located. Then the beacon added 3 more words that the matrix translated roughly as, we are coming. Moravel should have felt relief. Instead, she felt a cold dread creeping up her spine. The warning on the beacon suddenly seemed much more important. Beware what you summon. But it was too late now. Someone was coming. Something was coming. And the Velkari would soon learn that in a galaxy full of predators, they had just called the ones who ate other predators for sport. The Kruthok didn't know it yet, but their extinction clock had just started ticking. The edge of Velkari space looked empty. No stars nearby, just the dark void between spiral arms. That emptiness suddenly tore open like a wound. 50 ships emerged from slipspace, their hulls still glowing from the transition. They moved in perfect formation, each vessel a predator in its own right. The TEV Indomitable led the fleet. Admiral Catherine Morrison stood on the bridge, her reflection ghosted in the main viewport. Behind her, officers worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. The only sound was the soft hum of systems and the occasional beep of sensors. Sensor sweep complete, Admiral. The tactical officer reported. No hostile contacts in immediate vicinity. Detecting multiple Velkari refugee signals from the inner system, also picking up significant debris fields consistent with recent fleet actions. Morrison nodded slowly. Show me the distress signal data again, everything. The main screen filled with files. Morrison had already reviewed them a dozen times during the 3-month journey, but she wanted her crew to see. They needed to understand why they were here. The first file showed a Velkari colony world before the Kruthak arrived. Cities of crystal and light. Parks filled with families. Schools where children learned about art and mathematics. The Velkari were beautiful creatures, tall and graceful, with skin that shimmered in rainbow patterns when they were happy. The second file showed the same world 3 months later. The cities were cages now. The parks were harvesting centers. The schools were empty because there were no children left. The Velkari didn't shimmer anymore. They had learned about fear, and fear made their skin turn gray. A young ensign at the communication station turned away from her screen. Morrison heard her vomit into a waste bin. No one said anything. Half the crew had the same reaction the first time. 90% casualties in 3 years, Morrison said quietly. 40 worlds stripped clean. 6 billion people dead or enslaved, she paused. The Kruthak call it harvesting. They take genetic samples, run experiments, then dispose of the subjects. They're not even eating them. This is just science to them. Captain James Chen of the TV Valkyrie appeared on a smaller screen. His jaw was clenched tight. Admiral, my Marines are ready. Give us targets. Patience, Captain. We hunt smart, not angry. With respect, ma'am, I'm both. Morrison almost smiled. Chen was one of her best officers precisely because he cared too much. Ares, tactical assessment. The ship's artificial intelligence materialized as a hologram. Ares looked human, but moved in ways that were just slightly wrong. It made people uncomfortable, which was exactly why the AI had chosen that form. I have identified 3 strategic approaches, Admiral. Option Alpha, diplomatic contact with Kruthak leadership to negotiate cessation of hostilities. Option Beta, limited military intervention to establish buffer zones. Option Omega, complete dismantling of Kruthak military and governmental infrastructure. Time frame for Option Omega, 72 hours for major infrastructure, 2 weeks for complete neutralization. Several officers looked shocked. The Kruthak Dominion controlled over 30 star systems. It had fleets numbering in the thousands. Ares was talking about destroying an entire interstellar empire in less than a month. Casualties? Morrison asked. Terran casualties, minimal. Kruthak military casualties, total. Kruthak civilian casualties depend on your rules of engagement, Admiral. The bridge went silent. Everyone understood what Ares was really asking. This wasn't war. This was extermination. The question was how far they would take it. Morrison pulled up the first contact protocol on her command tablet. The rules were clear. When meeting a new species, humanity was supposed to introduce themselves peacefully, open diplomatic channels, and work through the Galactic Council for any conflicts. The protocol existed specifically to prevent humanity from doing what they did best: overwhelming violence. She read through it one more time, then set the tablet down. The first contact protocol assumes we're meeting civilized species engaged in legitimate conflicts. What I see here isn't war. It's extermination. The Krethak aren't soldiers, they're serial killers with starships. She looked around the bridge. Anyone disagree? No one spoke. Then I'm declaring the protocol null and void under Terran humanitarian intervention doctrine. As of this moment, the Krethak Dominion is classified as a hostile extermination threat. Ours implement option Omega. Rules of engagement: any Krethak military asset is a valid target. Civilian populations are to be warned once, then left to their leadership's choices. We're not here to occupy. We're here to stop a massacre. Acknowledged, Admiral. Uploading tactical packages to all ships now. Chen's face reappeared on screen. Admiral, the Valkyrie's Marines are ready for boarding actions. We've all seen the footage. My people understand the mission. Morrison studied him for a moment. This is going to get dark, Captain. When we board Krethak vessels, we're going to find things that will haunt us. Experiments, prisoners, evidence of atrocities. Your Marines need to be ready for that. They're ready, ma'am. We all knew what we signed up for when we joined Solar Defense. We protect humanity, but sometimes... He paused, searching for words. Sometimes protecting humanity means protecting everyone from the real monsters. Then let's go be the monsters that eat monsters, Morrison said softly. She turned to her tactical officer. Send a message to Earth Command. Authorization Morrison Alpha 7. Message reads, Wrath of Sol has arrived in theater. First contact protocol suspended per Terragov authority. Krethak Dominion classified as existential threat. Beginning extermination operations. Expect completion in 2 weeks. Morrison out. The communications officer looked pale. Ma'am, they're going to ask for clarification on extermination operations. Then tell them to review the files we sent them. They'll understand. Morrison pulled up the fleet disposition display. 50 ships. 50 chances to make this right. Ours take us dark. Full stealth protocols. No communications, no active sensors they can detect. We're ghosts until we're ready to strike. Acknowledged. Going dark now. The lights on the bridge dimmed to red. External communications shut down. The fleet disappeared from every sensor in the system except their own. They had arrived in Valkyrie space, but no one knew they were here yet. On Thera 7, Moravel was still waiting for a response to her distress signal. She didn't know that 50 Terran warships were already moving through her system like sharks in dark water. Didn't know that the galaxy was about to learn a new lesson about food. Chains and apex predators. She didn't know that humanity had just declared war on the Krethak Dominion. And when humans declared war, they didn't stop until their enemy ceased to exist. The hunt had begun. Hive Commander Zekroth reviewed the supply reports with growing irritation. 3 transport ships had failed to report in. That was unusual but not alarming. Space was dangerous and sometimes ships simply disappeared. He made a note to send search parties, then returned to more important matters. The Krethak Dominion had been expanding for 400 years. They had conquered 17 different species, harvested genetic data from hundreds of worlds, and never lost a major engagement. The Valkyrie had been their easiest conquest yet. Soft creatures with no understanding of violence. Perfect subjects for experimentation. Zekroth's communication panel beeped. Another report. 2 more transport ships missing, and a supply depot had gone silent. He sat up straighter in his command chair. 5 ships in 12 hours was more than coincidence. Scan the sector for spatial anomalies, he ordered. His tactical officer worked for several minutes. Multiple distortions detected, Commander. Could be natural phenomena or sensor ghosts. Readings are inconsistent. Dispatch a patrol squadron. Find those missing ships. The squadron launched an hour later. 3 heavy cruisers with full sensor arrays. They spread out across the sector, hunting for answers. They found them quickly. The first cruiser detected debris. A lot of debris. The tactical officer was trying to identify the wreckage when his sensors screamed warnings. Something massive had appeared behind them. The cruiser tried to turn, tried to bring weapons to bear, but it was already too late. The TEV Valkyrie opened fire at point-blank range. Railgun rounds moving at relativistic speeds punched through Krithak armor like paper. The cruiser tried to return fire, but human point defense systems swatted their missiles aside. 30 seconds after contact, the Krithak cruiser was an expanding cloud of gas and metal. Captain Chen watched the debris scatter. Target destroyed. Moving to next contact. The second cruiser saw what happened to the first. They immediately tried to jump to slipspace. Human weapons made that impossible. Precision strikes took out their drive systems, leaving them crippled and drifting. Then the Valkyrie moved alongside and magnetic clamps locked the ships together. Boarding teams, you are go, Chen ordered. The Marines went in through breaching charges. Krethak soldiers were waiting, but they had never fought humans before. They didn't understand what they were facing. The Krithak were strong, yes. Fast, yes. But humans were stronger and faster. And humans hunted in packs. The first Krethak soldier to encounter the Marines fired his weapon confidently. The human took the shot to his armor, barely slowed, and closed the distance in 3 strides. What happened next was recorded on helmet cameras. The footage would later be classified, not because it was secret, but because it was too disturbing for most species to watch. The Marines moved through the Krithak ship like a plague. They were efficient, brutal, and utterly merciless. Every Krithak soldier who fought died. Every Krithak officer who reached for a weapon died. In 12 minutes the ship was secured, but the Marines found something else on that ship. Holding cells. Valkyrie prisoners being transported for experimentation. Some of them were children. Captain Chen stood in the doorway of one cell and stared at the small gray-skinned figure huddled in the corner. The child was maybe 6 years old in human terms. She had scars from medical procedures. Her eyes were empty. Chen knelt down slowly. "Hey there," he said softly. "It's okay now. You're safe." The child didn't respond, didn't move. She had been broken in ways that couldn't be fixed quickly. Chen stood up and walked back to the command deck. His face was completely expressionless, which his Marines knew meant he was angrier than they'd ever seen. "Ours," he said quietly into his comm. "Update mission parameters. Find every ship, every station, every facility where they're holding prisoners. I want locations within the hour." "Acknowledged, Captain. Compiling target list now." Chen left one Krithak alive. A junior officer found cowering in a storage bay. The Marine pulled him out, dragged him to an escape pod, and threw him inside. "You're going to go back to your commanders," the Marine said. "You're going to tell them exactly what you saw here. Every detail. You understand?" The Krithak nodded frantically. "Good, because this is just the beginning. We're coming for all of you." The escape pod launched. The survivor would make it back to Krithak space. He would file his report, but when his superiors asked him to describe the attackers, he could only repeat the same thing over and over. "They smiled while they killed us." They smiled. The third patrol cruiser never even detected the humans. The TEV Indomitable hit them with long-range missiles while still in stealth. The Krithak died without ever knowing what killed them. Back on Theris 7, Moravel was in her laboratory when the alarm started, her screens filled with sensor data, massive energy signatures across the system, multiple Krithak installations going offline, explosions lighting up the darkness. "What's happening?" she demanded. Thelorus burst into the lab, his skin flashing colors of confusion and fear. "We're detecting large-scale combat operations, but we can't see who's attacking. Whoever they are, they're destroying everything Krithak. Supply depots, military stations, patrol ships, everything." "The beacon," Moravel whispered. "Someone answered our call. But who? We can't see them. We can't contact them. All we see is Krithak ships exploding." Moravel pulled up the communication logs. Her equipment had caught fragments of transmissions. Encrypted data in an unknown language. She fed it through her translation matrix. Most of it was military jargon she couldn't decipher, but one phrase kept appearing over and over. "FAFO." "What does that mean?" Thelorus asked. "I don't know. But whoever they are, they're not here to negotiate." Across the system, Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched her fleet work. The Krithak were trying to respond, but they were fighting blind. Every time they gathered forces, human ships would appear from nowhere, destroy them, and vanish again. "All ships reporting successful strikes, Admiral," her tactical officer said. "Enemy losses at 70% and climbing. They're trying to retreat to their stronghold systems." Morrison nodded. "Let them. We'll follow." She opened a fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Morrison. Phase 1 is complete. The Krithak know we're here now. They know they're being hunted. Now we give them a choice. Ares, prepare the broadcast. Standing by, Admiral. Morrison took a breath. This was the moment that would define everything. Open all Krithak frequencies. Make sure every ship, every station, every command center hears this. All frequencies open, ma'am. Attention, Krithak Dominion. You are currently at war with the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. We have reviewed your activities in Velkari space. We have seen your harvesting centers. We have recovered your prisoners. We have detailed files on every atrocity you have committed. You have 48 hours to release every slave, every prisoner, every captive in your territory. After that deadline, we stop accepting surrenders. You taught this galaxy to fear predators. Allow us to educate you on the food chain's apex. You have 48 hours. We suggest you use them wisely. The transmission ended. Morrison turned to her crew. Now we wait and see if they're smart enough to be scared. On his command ship, Sekroth listened to the transmission with his officers. For the first time in his career, he felt something he didn't immediately recognize. It took him several moments to understand what the sensation was. It was fear. The Hive Emperor of the Krithak Dominion sat on his throne and listened to his commanders argue. The throne room was massive, built to intimidate lesser species. Today it felt like a cage. We should negotiate, said General Korth. These Terrans are clearly advanced. We can offer them technology, resources, territory. We should fight, snarled Admiral Vex. We outnumber them 100 to 1. Mass our fleets and crush them. The Hive Emperor said nothing. He was watching the tactical displays that floated around his throne. In 48 hours, the Terrans had destroyed 30% of his military infrastructure. Not damaged, destroyed, completely wiped from existence, and no one had even seen them coming. They gave us a deadline, Korth continued. 48 hours to release the prisoners. If we comply, perhaps they will leave. If we comply, we show weakness, Vex countered. Every species in the galaxy will think they can challenge us. The Hive Emperor finally spoke. His voice was cold and final. We are Krithak. We do not bow to threats. We do not release prey. Send orders to all fleets, defend our territory, kill any Terran ship that enters our space, and send a message to these humans. Tell them that we reject their demands. Tell them that we have never surrendered in 400 years and we will not start now. The commanders bowed and left. The Hive Emperor sat alone on his throne and told himself he had made the right choice. He told himself that pride mattered more than fear. He told himself that the Krithak would prevail. He was wrong about all of it. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Morrison watched the countdown clock hit 0. 48 hours. No response from Krithak leadership except defiance. She had hoped they would be smarter. She had hoped they would understand. Ares, she said quietly. Execute final solution protocol. Acknowledged. Uploading target packages to all fleet elements. Estimated time to complete primary objectives, 72 hours. Captain Chen appeared on her communication screen. Admiral, my Marines are ready. We've identified 6 major slave facilities. Request permission to begin liberation operations. Granted. Chen, I want every prisoner out alive if possible. But if you encounter resistance, you have authorization to use any force necessary. Understood, ma'am. Valkyrie out. Morrison pulled up the tactical overview. 50 Terran ships against an empire of thousands. On paper, it was suicide. But paper didn't account for human tactics. Paper didn't account for ships built to take punishment that would vaporize any other vessel. Paper didn't account for humans who were very, very good at killing. All ships, she said into the fleet channel. This is Morrison. The Krithak had their chance. They chose pride over survival. Show them what that choice costs. All targets are live. Rules of engagement. If it's Krithak military or government, destroy it. Make sure every strike is broadcast on open channels. I want the entire galaxy to watch what happens when you harvest sentient species. Morrison out. The Terran fleet split into hunting packs and dove into Krithak space like wolves. The first target was a military academy on the Krithak moon of Vesh. 3,000 officers in training. The TV hammer appeared in orbit and fired a single kinetic round from high altitude. The academy ceased to exist. The round hit with enough force to create a crater visible from space. The second target was a government complex on Kar Hess Minor. The facility housed the Genetic Research Division, the same division that had designed the harvesting protocols. The TV Righteous appeared overhead and the complex vanished in fire. Target after target fell. Military shipyards, command centers, research facilities, anything connected to the Dominion's war machine. The Terrans didn't occupy territory. They just destroyed infrastructure and moved on. Krithak fleet scrambled to respond, but every time they gathered, human ships would ambush them. The Krithak had never fought an enemy that refused to hold position. The humans appeared, killed, and vanished. It was like fighting ghosts. But the most brutal operations were the liberation missions. Captain Chen led his Marines into the first slave facility personally. It was on a station orbiting a gas giant. According to intel, it held 2,000 Velkari prisoners. Chen's teams breached the hull in 6 locations simultaneously. The Krithak guards fought back. They died quickly, but Chen's Marines found something that made several of them freeze. Experimentation chambers. The Krithak had been dissecting Velkari while they were still alive, recording their responses, making notes about pain thresholds and genetic structure. Chen stood in one chamber and looked at the restraint table. There was blood everywhere, recent blood. He turned to his second in command. Find every Krithak scientist in this station. Bring them to the main hangar. Sir, just do it. 20 minutes later, 37 Krithak scientists stood in the hangar under guard. Chen walked in front of them slowly. You're going to tell me where the prisoners are. All of them. Every location. You have 1 minute to start talking. A senior scientist stepped forward. You cannot treat us this way. We are protected under the Galactic Convention of... Chen shot him. The scientist's body hit the deck with a wet sound. The other scientists started talking immediately. Within an hour, every prisoner on the station was evacuated to medical ships. The scientists were put in an escape pod and launched toward Krithak space. Chen left them one message. Tell your leaders what you saw. Tell them what happens to people who torture children. Back on Theris 7, Moravel watched the broadcasts in stunned silence. The Terrans were systematically dismantling the Krithak Dominion. They weren't just winning battles. They were erasing the Krithak from existence. 6 other galactic civilizations sent ships to intervene. A delegation arrived at the edge of the battle zone and demanded the Terrans cease their genocide. Admiral Morrison invited them aboard the Indomitable. She showed them 10 minutes of footage from the harvesting centers. The footage of what the Krithak had done to the Velkari. The children in cages. The experimentation chambers. The mass graves. 3 of the delegates vomited. All of them left without another word about genocide. 72 hours after the deadline passed, the Krithak Dominion's military was reduced by 90%. Every major government facility was destroyed. Their leadership was either dead or in hiding. The empire that had stood for 400 years was broken. Admiral Morrison finally opened a channel to Theris 7. This is Admiral Catherine Morrison of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. We received your distress call. The threat has been neutralized. We will be departing your space within the week. Morabel appeared on screen. She looked at Morrison's face and saw something that frightened her more than the Krithak ever had. She saw someone who had killed so many that the numbers stopped meaning anything. You saved us, Morabel said quietly. But at what cost? The cost was paid by the Krithak. Not by you. Morrison paused. I need you to understand something. We didn't come here to make friends. We came because what was happening to your people was unacceptable. We stopped it. That's all. Will you stay? Help us rebuild? No, we're not occupiers. We're not peacekeepers. We're the thing you call when extinction is the only other option. Morrison's expression softened slightly. Rebuild your civilization. Remember what happened here. And please never call us again unless you're facing the end. Because when humans answer, we don't do half measures. The transmission ended. Moravel sat in silence, trying to process what she had witnessed. The Terrans had saved them. They had also shown the galaxy what apex predators looked like when they decided to hunt. On Karhes, the Hive Emperor sat in his ruined throne room. Most of his government was dead. His fleets were scattered. His empire was ash. He had been so certain of his superiority, so confident in his power. He had been wrong. And the price of being wrong was everything. 6 months after the Velkari incident, the galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened. The Galactic Council met in emergency session for the 7th time. Representatives from 40 civilizations filled the chamber, all talking at once. The Terrans must be sanctioned, said Ambassador Krell of the Arathi Federation. They destroyed an entire civilization without council approval. They stopped a genocide, countered Ambassador Thera of the peaceful Confederation. The Krithak were exterminating the Velkari. Someone had to act, but the response was disproportionate, Krell insisted. The Terrans didn't just stop the Krithak. They erased them. That's not justice, that's extinction. The council chamber erupted in argument. No one could agree on what the Terran intervention meant. Some called it heroic. Others called it terrifying. Everyone agreed on one thing. Humanity had just announced itself as the galaxy's new apex predator. On Theris 7, elder scientist Moravel sat in her rebuilt laboratory and compiled her final report. She had spent 6 months analyzing everything that happened. Every battle. Every decision. Every consequence. The report was titled The Terrans' Benevolent Monsters or Evolution's Warning. She read through it one more time before submitting it to the Galactic Archive. The conclusions were uncomfortable. The humans did what they promised. They stopped the Krithak. They liberated our people. They asked for nothing in return. By any measure, they were heroes. But heroes should not be this frightening. When I look at the footage of Terran ships in battle, I do not see saviors. I see something that should not exist. Something too good at killing to be trusted. The Terrans saved us, yes, but they also showed us that there are worse things in the universe than the Krithak. There are the things that hunt the Krithak. And if we ever anger those things, if we ever become their prey instead of their protected, then no force in the galaxy could save us. The report went into the archive. Within hours, it had been downloaded by every major civilization. Some agreed with her assessment. Many did not. But everyone read it. The political fallout was immediate. 7 civilizations formally requested protection agreements with Earth. They wanted human warships in their space. They wanted humanity's weapons pointed at their enemies. They were essentially hiring Earth as cosmic enforcers. 12 other civilizations proposed that humanity be declared a restricted species, too dangerous for general contact, too violent to be allowed free access to the galaxy. The proposal called for Earth to be quarantined until human aggression could be properly controlled. Earth government found both proposals insulting and ignored them. But in the shadows, other powers were moving. A coalition of predator species had watched the Velkari incident with growing alarm. The Krithak had been the strongest military force in 3 sectors. If humans could eliminate them so easily, what did that mean for everyone else? Secret meetings were held. Plans were discussed. The Predator Coalition began quietly building up their fleets and sharing military technology. They didn't call it preparation for war. They called it defensive measures against existential threats. But everyone knew what it really meant. The old guard was threatened by the new apex predator, and they were preparing to do something about it. On Earth, Admiral Morrison stood in front of a military tribunal. She had been court-martialed for exceeding her authority, violating first contact protocol and using excessive force. The charges were serious. The punishment could be the end of her career. The prosecution presented their case. Morrison had gone to Velkari space without proper authorization. She had declared war on the Krithak without diplomatic attempts at resolution. She had overseen the destruction of an entire interstellar civilization. By any standard, she had violated multiple regulations. The defense was simple. Morrison's lawyer played 10 minutes of footage from the Krithak harvesting centers. The same footage that had made the alien delegates vomit. The footage of what happened to Velkari children in the experimentation chambers. The tribunal watched in silence. When the footage ended, the lead judge looked at Morrison. "Admiral, did you know what you would find before you arrived in Velkari space?" "Yes, sir." The distress signal included detailed documentation. And knowing that, you chose to violate protocol and engage in what the prosecution calls genocide? Morrison stood straight. "Sir, with respect, what happened to the Krithak was not genocide. It was pest control. They were not a civilization. They were a disease. And when you find a disease that's killing billions, you don't negotiate with it. You eradicate it." The tribunal went into deliberation. They returned an hour later. "Admiral Morrison, this tribunal finds you guilty of all charges. However, given the exceptional circumstances and the fact that your actions saved an estimated 4 billion lives, your sentence is suspended. Furthermore, you are hereby promoted to Fleet Admiral and given command of the new Humanitarian Intervention Fleet." Dismissed. Outside the courtroom, Morrison was swarmed by reporters. She ignored most of their questions. But one reporter asked something that made her pause. "Admiral, do you regret what you did to the Krithak?" Morrison looked directly into the camera. "I regret that we didn't arrive sooner. I regret that 6 billion Velkari died before we could help them. I regret that my people had to see the things we found on those ships and stations. But do I regret stopping the Krithak? No, not for 1 second." The interview went viral across human space. Public opinion was overwhelmingly in Morrison's favor. Earth had proven itself the protector of the weak, the hunter of monsters, and most humans were proud of that. But Morrison herself felt differently. Late at night, alone in her quarters, she pulled up the casualty reports. Not just Krithak casualties, though those numbered in the millions. She looked at the psychological reports from her crew, the Marines who had found the experimentation chambers, the ship captains who had vaporized cities, the officers who had watched prisoners die because they arrived too late. They had won. They had saved the Velkari. But victory had a cost that numbers couldn't capture. On Thera 7, Commander Thelris proposed building a monument. Not to the Terrans exactly, but to what happened. He called it the price of summoning Deathworlders. The monument was a simple pillar of black stone. On one side, it listed the names of every Velkari who died in the Krithak invasion. On the other side was a single sentence in both Velkari and Terran languages. They came. They saved us. They terrified us. May we never need them again. Moravel attended the dedication ceremony. She stood before the monument and thought about everything she had learned. The galaxy was more dangerous than she had imagined, but it was also more protected. Humanity had shown that predators could be stopped, that monsters could be killed, that hope existed even in the darkest moments. But hope came with teeth and claws now. Hope came with warships that could destroy planets. Hope came with soldiers who smiled while they killed. Back on Earth, Admiral Morrison received a new alert. Another distress signal from the opposite end of the galaxy, a civilization under attack by slavers. The transmission was desperate, pleading for help. Morrison pulled up the tactical data. It would take 4 months to get there. 4 months while people died. She looked at the casualty projections if they didn't intervene. Millions dead within a year. She opened a fleet-wide channel. All ships of the Humanitarian Intervention Fleet. This is Morrison. We have a new mission, plot course for the Theta sector, maximum slip space velocity. We have people to save and bad guys to kill. Let's move. The fleet began preparations. Crews loaded weapons. Ships powered up drives. Marines checked their equipment. Everyone knew what was coming. Another war. Another enemy. Another chance to prove that humanity was the apex predator this galaxy needed. Morrison stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched the stars. She thought about the Velkari, the Krithak, all the civilizations watching to see what humanity would do next. "Ares," she said quietly, "do you think we're the good guys?" The AI materialized beside her. "Define good guys, Admiral. People who help others, protect the weak, stop the monsters. By that definition, yes, you are the good guys. Then why do I feel like a monster?" Ares was silent for a moment. "Because being the good guys sometimes requires monstrous actions. You killed millions to save billions. That is the burden of being Apex. You make the hard choices so others do not have to." Morrison nodded slowly. It wasn't a satisfying answer, but it was an honest one. The fleet entered slipspace. Behind them, the galaxy continued to debate what humanity represented. Saviors or threats, protectors or predators, heroes or villains. The truth was simpler and more complicated than any of those labels. Humanity was the thing you called when everything else had failed, when extinction was the only other option, when someone needed to teach the monsters to fear the dark. And as long as there were monsters in the galaxy, humanity would be there to hunt them. Because in the end, someone had to be the apex predator. Someone had to be willing to do what needed to be done. Someone had to carry the burden of being the galaxy's last resort. That someone was humanity, and the galaxy would just have to deal with it.